Pulling into Shannon Rose Hill Cemetery. Here we'll find the final resting place of Lee Harvey Oswald, O-S-W-A-L-D, in the words of Henry Wade.
Fellow's name is Oswald.
Oswald, Lee Harvey. Yeah, I can keep going. Shannon Rose Hill. We're in Fort Worth, Texas. Squish squash, you can hear my feet because it rained heavily the night before here in the Fort Worth area. This is the final resting place of Lee Harvey Oswald, the accused assassin of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963.
No, sir, I'm not a communist, and I think that the red herring and so forth is rather ridiculous to toss into this conversation.
Then are you a Marxist?
Well, I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes, sir, and also other philosophers.
But are you a Marxist? I think you did admit on an earlier radio interview that you consider yourself a Marxist.
Oh, I would very definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is correct. But that does not mean, however, that I'm a communist.
What is the difference between the two?
Well, there's a great deal of difference. Several American parties in several countries are based on Marxism, such as Ghana. Certain countries have characteristics of a socialist system, such as Great Britain with its socialized medicine. These, then, are the differences between an outright communist country and countries which adhere to leftist or Marxist principles.
In your work with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, what are you advocating?
We advocate restoration of diplomatic, trade, and tourist relations with Cuba.
Also, eyewitnesses see him shoot Officer J.D. Tippit in Oak Cliff section of Dallas. On November 10th, actually April 10th, 1963, Oswald takes a shot at General Edwin Walker, who lived on Turtle Creek in Dallas. Right next door, Marguerite Oswald, his mother, is buried in an unmarked grave. Oswald gets many visitors each year. Flowers, beer bottles, I've seen just about everything here. My first trip to this cemetery was about 25 years ago. I was looking for Oswald's grave. They wouldn't give me directions, but they did tell me where B.D. Hayes is buried, knowing that Oswald is close by. B.D. Hayes is just an average bearer, but at that time he was the closest individual buried next to Oswald, or fairly close. In this video, we're going to visit with several people connected one way or another to the JFK assassination. They're all buried in Dallas. We'll visit the final resting place of Parkland Doctors Newsman, the mayor of Dallas, chief of police, the sheriff of Dallas County. We'll also see the grave locations of eyewitnesses. If you're looking for Oswald at Rose Hill Cemetery, look for these stairs. Straight out there is Lee Harvey Oswald, right there. Towards the end of this video, please stick with me because my two friends here and we go out to the J.D. Tippit crime scene location where eyewitnesses see Oswald shoot Officer J.D. Tippit. I made a 30-mile trip to Dallas. This is our second cemetery visit. In this video, we're pulling into Grove Hill Memorial Park. Here we'll find 5 graves that are connected to the Kennedy assassination. Our first stop in this memorial park is the grave location of George Dealey. George Dealey was a longtime publisher of the Dallas Morning News. Dealey Plaza is named in his honor. It became instantly famous when it was the site of the John F. Kennedy assassination. Matter of fact, my two friends are down there now. I'm going to bring in a map of what Dealey Plaza looks like from a satellite view. This is the area that John F. Kennedy's motorcade went through when he was assassinated November 22nd, 1963. I think I said satellite picture. I meant to say from the top floor of the Hyatt Hotel downtown Dealey Plaza. Our second stop is the Lady in Red. If you watch the Zapruder film, she's wearing a red raincoat. This is Jean Hill. She wore red so that her Dallas police officer boyfriend can see her as he drove by. Jean Hill was a close eyewitness to the JFK assassination.
This is Mrs. Jean Hill of Dallas. Could you tell us what you saw?
Yes, Mary and I had come down to see the president this morning, and we tried to get a place where we could be away from everyone, and we, I guess, succeeded. As the car came down the hill toward us, he was on our side of the street, and the president and Mrs. Kennedy were in the back seat. They had a little dog between them looking at it, and just as the car came right in line with us, the president looked up, and just as he looked up, 2 shots rang out, and he grabbed his chest, and this real odd look came over his face, and he pitched forward onto her lap. And she jumped up over him at that and screamed and said, "My God, he's been shot." And there was just an instantaneous, sort of an instant's pause, and in the motorcade it momentarily halted, and 3 or 4 more shots rang out, and they sped away real quickly. And by that time I became aware of Mary tugging on my foot saying, "Get down, they're shooting." And it hadn't registered. I'd been so busy looking at the president.
Jean mentions her good friend Marianne Mormon standing next to her in a blue raincoat. I have a interview on my other channel, True Crime with Diamond Dave, with Marianne. Go over there and check it out if you're interested. Jean in later years would write a book, The Last Dissenting Witness, November 22nd, 1963. Check it out, it's worth the read. This is a grave of Jesse Curry. He's the Dallas police chief. He's riding in the lead car along with Sheriff Decker in the presidential motorcade that day. Curry received death threats for allowing Oswald to be shot by Jack Ruby in the Dallas Police Department basement while they're transferring him to the county jail.
Can you detail for us Oswald's movements yesterday, before and after the assassination, as you know them now?
All I know about it is that a man brought him to work yesterday morning. He had a large package with him, which we believe to be the rifle. The next we know of him, a porter in the building took him up to the 6th floor at shortly after 12 o'clock. And he was next seen on the 2nd or 3rd floor in a lunchroom in the building.
By whom and after the assassination was this?
After the assassination, but one of the first officers that went into the building and the manager of the building. The next knowledge we have of the man is when he shot our officer over in Oak Cliff.
Why is it that he was not arrested when the officer saw him the first time?
Because the manager said he was an employee. He said, "He's all right, he's an employee." And in the rush to get up to the floor where the shooting occurred, the officer passed him on by when the manager told him that this is one of the employees.
He retires from the Dallas Police Department and later works as chief of security for Texas Bank. Before his death on June the 22nd, 1980, he dies of a heart attack. The interview you just saw is the day after the assassination on the 23rd. Oswald is still alive in a jail cell 2 floors above Chief Curry's office. Our next stop here at Grove Hill Cemetery is Detective Jim Leval. He's interred next to his wife, Timey. Both are U.S. Navy veterans. Jim Leval is the detective that was handcuffed to Oswald's right-hand side. He's the one that's wearing a light-colored suit during the transfer.
I told him that if anybody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you are. And he said, oh, nobody's going to shoot at me. The President of the United States was making a visit to Dallas in 1963.
The President's car is now turning onto Elm Street.
We were listening to the dispatcher because he was giving the motorcade's location block by block. My lieutenant said, well, they shot the President. I didn't believe it because I was just listening to him and he was all right. But the dispatcher started carrying on about it, so I realized he's telling me the truth. About that time, the sheriff's department reported an officer was being shot in Oak Cliff. As a result, any prisoners that was arrested connected with that was also assigned to me. In fact, one of the first that was brought in was Lee Harvey Oswald. And when I asked him about shooting a police officer, he said, I didn't shoot anybody. He knew we was going to wrap him with a presidential shooting sooner or later, and he wanted to get his denial in. He hadn't shot anybody. On Sunday, the 24th, we were beginning to transfer Lee Harvey Oswald to the Dallas County Jail. We had so many threats called in, they was going to take Oswald away from us and do all sorts of bad things to him. I said, what I'm going to do is just handcuff myself to him. So if they take him, they got to take me, and I'm not going to go willingly. Just as we was getting ready to go down, I told him, and Lee, if anybody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you are. He kind of laughed, and he said, oh, nobody's going to shoot at me. As we walked into the basement, I saw Jack Ruby. He was standing in the crowd of reporters and police officers. He had the pistol in his left hand pressed against his leg. I was able to reach across and catch him by the shoulder because I had jerked on Oswald trying to pull him behind me, and I was pulling him towards me. He switched the gun over to his right hand and pulled the trigger.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun.
Just a side note, if you'll allow me, Jim and I were personal friends. I ended up becoming his insurance agent as well. His son Jimmy lived in Henderson, Nevada, right next to Las Vegas. Many times he would come and visit. He'd drop by my office for coffee. Jim was a real people person. He enjoyed meeting people and telling his story. A lot of my policyholders got a big kick out of meeting somebody attached to history. Jim and Timmy are both sorely missed. Those of us who study the JFK assassination, and when we get to the point where we want to reach out and touch those who were involved in one way or another in the assassination, I think Jim Leval was the easiest to approach. Many times when I'm visiting his house here in Dallas, we would walk to the mailbox. He would have autograph requests from all over the world. Timmy was a nurse in the United States Navy. Jim Leval was injured. That's how they met. I also want to mention that Jim Leval was in Pearl Harbor when it was attacked, and that was also on a Sunday. Now we're at L.C. Graves. He was the detective that was on the other side of Oswald during the jail transfer. They were moving him from the city jail uptown to the county jail. Ironically, it's at Dealey Plaza. L.C. Graves is the detective seen here wrestling the gun out of Jack Ruby's hand.
5.5 hours ago, a shot echoed through these halls, and one of the men closest to the point where the shot was fired is this man. He is a detective, Detective L.C. Graves. Could you tell us what happened and what you were doing at the time?
Well, about 11:15 this morning, in an attempt to transfer Oswald to the county jail, we got as far as the basement of the city hall, and a man lunged out of the crowd and fired one shot into his stomach.
Now, what were you doing? Were you escorting him?
Yes, I was helping to escort him at that time.
Were you holding on to his arm?
Yes, I had a hold of his left arm.
Now, there was another detective. He was handcuffed to Oswald?
Yes, Detective Leval was handcuffed to him with his left arm to Oswald's right arm.
When the man came out of the crowd, and the shot was fired. What did you do?
Well, I grabbed his arm and took the pistol away from him.
Were there any screams?
I didn't hear any screams at that time.
The man, did he appear so quickly that preventive action could not have been taken?
Yes, he did. He was only a few feet. We were only a few feet from the newsmen that were right in front of us. It was quite a large line of them, and he just lunged out of the line of men right into us.
Thank you very much, sir.
LC was the brother-in-law of Paul Bentley. Detective Bentley was also a detective on the Dallas police force. Bentley was involved in the capture of Oswald at the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff, part of Dallas. Listen to these sirens, isn't that appropriate? LC dies after surgery on February 11th, 1995 at age 76. Now I've made a 30-minute drive to the north side of Dallas. We're at Sparkman Hillcrest Memorial Park. These are also the people that handled the Clyde Barrow interment. I think we'll make 6 stops here. Our first stop at this memorial park is John Eric Johnson. Looks like I need to do some cleaning up here. Mr. Johnson was a civic leader. In fact, he was at the Dallas Trade Mart awaiting the arrival of President Kennedy. He was the head of that committee, the welcoming committee. He also is the one that announced that JFK was shot.
Now, here's an announcement from the platform. Mr. Eric Johnson with an announcement.
I'm not sure that I can say what I have to say. I feel a little bit like solemn Pearl Harbor does. It is true that our President, Governor Conley, and the motorcade have been shot. We do not know how seriously. Our reports are scant. They are difficult to get. We shall tell you as much as we know, as soon as we know anything. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson later becomes the mayor of Dallas. He's a strong leader within the community, easily elected, well liked. Very smart individual. He has an engineering degree. There's a education building named after him here in Dallas. Now straight to the car to get cleaning supplies and come back and clean up Mr. Johnson out of respect. We're at the final resting place of Henry Wade. He is the Dallas County District Attorney. I'm going to bring in a clip that he talks about the evidence that they have stacked up against Oswald.
The purpose of this news conference is to detail some of the evidence against Oswald for the assassination of the president. This evidence was gathered largely by the Dallas police, who did an excellent job on this with the help of some of the federal agencies. And I'm going through the evidence piece by piece for you. Number one, as some of this you will already know, some of it you won't, I don't think. As all of you do know, first we have a number of witnesses that saw the person with the gun on the 6th floor of the bookstore building, the window detailing the window where he was looking out. Inside this window, the police found a row of books, cases, boxes, hiding someone sitting in the window from people on the same floor looking in. On the window was some boxes where, in the little circle around the window by the bookcases, some boxes where apparently the person was sitting, because he was seen from that particular window. On this box that the defendant was sitting on, his palm print was found and was identified as his. The 3 ejected shells were found right by the box. The shells were of an odd caliber of the type and later determined the gun that was found on the floor. The gun was hidden on this same floor.
Wade serves as Dallas County District Attorney from 1951 through 1986, making him the country's longest continually serving district attorney. Interestingly, he's a roommate of John Connally, Governor John Connally, who was wounded in the motorcade as well. Another interesting fact, Roe versus Wade, that's him. Lots of history here. Now we'll make our way over to the mausoleum. I can think of 3 or 4 stops we'll need to make. I'll probably need to get help for one of them. I may have to go to the front office and ask. Well, a funeral director volunteered to come out and show me a couple of locations. I'm very grateful for that. It cuts the hunting time way down. He's in the van here. We'll go inside and see who we can find. We're at the meditation area of the mausoleum, and this is the location that I had to ask for directions. On the left-hand side, way up at the top, this will be the resting place of James Atkins. He was a photographer down at Dealey Plaza that day in November. The funeral director said his name is not prominently displayed, but he's definitely in there. In fact, the funeral director said, he pointed up, he said he's definitely in there. Okay, I'm going to bring in a picture now that was taken. It's called Atkins 6. If you look at it, you can see JFK reacting after he's been shot through the neck. Right in front of him is Governor Connally, who is turning right to look over his right shoulder to see what's going on. If you look at the steps of the Texas School Book Depository, that fella, his name is Billy Lovelady. Now, a lot of people believe that was Oswald, but it was not. They look similar in appearance, but that's definitely Billy Lovelady, and he testified he was on the steps that day. The Secret Service agent, that's Clint Hill. He's the one that jumps off of the follow-up car, which is named the Queen Mary, and he jumps on back of the limousine. His job that day was to protect Jacqueline Kennedy, and of course to protect JFK as well, but he's assigned to Jacqueline Kennedy. I can't tell you what a thrill it is to find James Atkins. I looked for him for years. Now we got to go out the door and go into the next area. I'm really thrilled to find the final resting place of Dr. Paul Peters. He's a trauma room physician. When John F. Kennedy came to Parkland Hospital for treatment, Dr. Peters says that he was having lunch that day. He made his way to Trauma Room 1. It had all the state-of-the-art medical equipment. They did everything they could humanly possible to save John F. Kennedy's life. But he died at approximately 1 o'clock on November 22nd, 1963. Dr. Peters gave many interviews to the press. You can find him online. Now we're at the adoration section of the mausoleum. As we enter this area, there are 2 visits we'll make that's connected one way or another to the JFK assassination. This is Sheriff Bill Decker. He's Sheriff Dallas County from 1949 until his death in 1970. He's very popular, easily reelected. Clyde Decker is his spouse, who is a female, by the way. Sheriff Decker was also in the lead car during the motorcade. It's customary that the sheriff will go to the city jail to pick up the bad guy, But in this situation, being high profile, Oswald is to be brought to the county jail. Would history be different? Who really knows? Bill Decker, legendary lawman in Dallas County. Down just a few steps is Judge Sarah Hughes. She was a friend of Lyndon Baines Johnson. She was chosen to board Air Force One to swear in the new president, Lyndon Baines Johnson.
When I called the office, I was told that the Vice President of the United States wanted me to come out to the airport and swear him in as president.
There were about 25 people in the plane. There were some congressmen, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Kennedy, some of the security men, some newspaper men, and the vice president stood up in front of me. His wife stood on his left, and Mrs. Kennedy had sent word in that she wanted to be present. I gave Mr. Johnson the oath of office. He swore to perform the duties of the President of the United States to the best of his ability, to uphold, defend, and preserve the Constitution of the United States, and then ended with, "So help me God."
Interesting to me that she's interred close to Sheriff Bill Decker. Now we have traveled about 6 miles. We're arriving at Restland Memorial Park. Inside here we'll find the mayor, Mayor Cabell, also find Captain Fritz, and an eyewitness, Ted Calloway. Our first stop here at Restland Memorial Park is Captain Will Fritz. He's a legendary lawman with the Dallas Police Department. Quite an interrogator, quite a reputation. Captain Fritz is an interesting individual. He lived in a hotel across, actually catty corner from the Dallas Police Department downtown. When he met the love of his life, she made him get out of there, and they bought a house here in Dallas. It was Captain Fritz who assigned Jim Leval and L.C. Graves to transfer Oswald from the city jail to the county jail. Captain Fritz was also in charge of the case to collect evidence.
This is Captain Will Fritz of the Dallas Police Department. Chief of Detectives is a man who's known as perhaps one of the most astute crime investigators in the whole Southwest. Captain, where do you think your investigation stands now? Does it look good?
Yes, it looks real good. I think we're in good shape. I think we're in good shape on both cases, both the killing of the president and the killing of the police officer later.
You said a little while ago, sir, that you thought you had it cinched. Do you feel that strongly about it, sir?
Yes, sir, I do. I feel that it's all right.
Could you tell me just one more thing, sir, about the transportation of Oswald? You related some details about that, how you had pinned that down. His transportation from the book depository.
Yes, where he worked. He rode a bus for a short distance, got off the bus and caught a cab and rode the cab home, and changed his clothing and started the picture show where he encountered the officer that he killed.
That's pretty well nailed down.
That's it, yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Captain.
The press would hang out on the 3rd floor of the Dallas Police Department hoping to get interviews and to get a glimpse of Lee Harvey Oswald. Our next stop is Mayor Cabell. Look, here I'll back up and get the zoom down, get the shadow out of the way. He's interred here with his wife Elizabeth. She lived many years after he died. It was Mayor Cabell who welcomed President John F. Kennedy to Dallas, along with Governor Connally and Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Later that day, he's interviewed on a television station, and it was that very day of the assassination. So he talks about what happened. He's also asked by a reporter what effect it would have on the city of Dallas.
After having gone through the events of today, frankly, I'm still in a state of shock, and it's hard to collect my thoughts and to be coherent. When you think that when Mrs. Cabell and I welcomed the President, Mrs. Kennedy, the Vice President, and Mrs. Johnson on their arrival this morning, the completely friendly atmosphere that pervaded the whole ceremony, and then that magnificent caravan through the streets of Dallas, and where we remarked that never in our lives, in the lifetime that we've spent here in Dallas, have we seen so many thousands of people turn out for any event. Never have we seen such enthusiasm, such warmth. Never have we seen such spontaneous applause that greeted car after car as they passed. And then after 12 or 13 miles of that type of reception, and to hear those shots ring out and to realize what they meant, what was going on, it's indescribable.
What will that do to Dallas, Mayor?
I don't think that this will hurt Dallas as a city, because I believe that the people of the nation realize that this was not an act of Dallas, not an act of the true thinking of Dallas. This was the act of a maniac.
Had to be difficult being a mayor of Dallas and living with what happened in your city. But one thing that helped Dallas was the television series Dallas and the Dallas Cowboys. They're cutting the grass nearby. Our next stop, I guess we can call Ted Calloway an ear witness and an eyewitness. Here he's being interviewed by Eddie Barker, a local Dallas news reporter and anchorman. Incidentally, it was Eddie Barker who announced the death of JFK. He was the first newsman to announce the death.
What did you do, Mr. Calloway, after this man ran around the corner? Where did you go?
I ran down in the direction of the shooting, down toward Patton and 10th Street, and when I rounded the corner, I could see a squad car there. And by this time, there's 2 or 3 or 4 women had gathered round, and I saw Officer Tippett laying in the street. I could tell by looking at him that he was dead. He was laying on his pistol. He had drawn his pistol. His strap on his holster was unsnapped, and I imagine that he had drawn his pistol while he was falling, because he was laying under his left side. So I took the pistol from under him and laid on top of the hood of the squad car. And then I ran to the squad car and called in on the radio and told them that an officer had been shot. And they said that someone else had already reported it, so for me to stay off the air. Yes, sir, I saw him that night in the police lineup. They asked me to come down to police headquarters, and I identified him in the lineup as the man that I had seen running with a pistol in his hand.
Did you have any trouble identifying him in the lineup?
None whatsoever.
Ted was a used car manager at Deutsch Motors, which is located at Jefferson and Patton. This explains how he can hear the shots from out behind. He also went down and helped load the body of J.D. Tippett into the ambulance as they head off to Methodist Hospital in Oak Cliff. It was also Ted Calloway who got J.D. Tippett's pistol and chased after Lee Harvey Oswald, but just didn't catch him. Here's the noisemaker. About a 15-minute drive will take you to our next location. We're pulling into Calvary Hill Cemetery. We'll visit with one interment here. We're walking up on a grave location of a close eyewitness to the assassination. This is the resting place of Charles Brehm. Yeah, we're really close to the airport, by the way. Charles Brehm is down at Dealey Plaza with his 5-year-old boy named Joe. That means today Joe is 66 years old. Mr. Brehm tells an interesting story during interviews, and that is he asked law enforcement if he can take a break and make a phone call to the Knights of Columbus to tell them to shut the oven off because the meat is cooked. Well, law enforcement took that as a secret code in regards to the assassination. Now here's Charles being interviewed by local news reporters that very day.
Unfortunately, I was probably 15 to 20 feet away from the president when it happened.
Tell us exactly what you saw, sir.
He was coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Palmer Street, and I asked Joe to wave to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and the man...
That's all right, sir. You go ahead and tell it.
As he was waving back, the shot rang out, and he slumped down in the seat, and his wife reached up toward him, and as he was slumping down, and the second shot went off, and it just knocked him down from the seat.
Two shots.
Two shots.
Did you see the man who did the...
No, sir, I did not see the man who did it. All I did was look in the man's face when he was shot there and saw that expression on his face and grab himself and slide. And the second one, whenever it went, why, I'm positive it had hit him. I hope it didn't, but I'm positive that it hit him, and he went all the way down in the car. Then they speeded up, and I didn't know what was going on, so I just grabbed the boy and fell on him in the hopes that there wasn't a maniac around me.
Well, you can imagine living with this experience your entire life. Also the 5-year-old son, Joe. Wonder where Joe is today. Okay, I wanted to make the trip to this cemetery to get Mr. Brehm, as he's part of the JFK Connections. Now we're close to downtown Dallas. We'll make one grave visit in here. It's a Jewish cemetery. Looks like a tight squeeze. Don't scratch the rental car. That can cause some heartache. Abraham Zapruder of the Zapruder film. He films the assassination. It's a 26-second video. That morning, the 22nd, it was supposed to rain, so he didn't bring in his camera. His secretary talks him in running home and getting it. He does. He gets up on a pedestal in Dealey Plaza and films the headshots. I will not bring the video in here, but if you're interested, you can easily find it online. Later, the United States government purchased the original film from the Zapruder estate. I think it was $8 million. I'm going to bring in a film clip of Abraham Zapruder visiting with Jay Watson, a news reporter, news anchor in Dallas, fairly close after the assassination.
A gentleman just walked in our studio that I am meeting for the first time, as well as you. This is WFA TV in Dallas, Texas. May I have your name, please, sir?
My name is Abraham Zapruder.
Mr. Zapruder?
Zapruder, yes, sir.
Zapruder. And would you tell us your story, please, sir?
I got out and about a half hour earlier and get into a good spot to shoot some pictures. And I found a spot, one of these concrete blocks that I have down near that park near the underpass. And I got on top there was another girl from my office. She was right behind me. And as I was shooting, as the president was coming down from Houston Street making his turn, it was about halfway down there, I heard a shot. And he slumped to the side like this. Then I heard another shot or two. I couldn't say what it was, one or two. And I saw his head practically open up, all blood and everything. And I kept on shooting. That's about all. I'm just sick again.
I think that pretty well expresses the entire feelings of the whole world. You have the film in your camera. We'll try
Yes, I brought it on the studio now.
We'll try to get that processed and have it as soon as possible. Right.
Mr. Zapruder owned a dress manufacturing company downtown Dallas called Jennifer Jr.'s. The building was directly across the street from the Texas School Book Depository. You know, I was thinking if this happened today, God forbid, everyone would have a camera on their cell phone. You can imagine. We're pulling into our 6th cemetery. That's a nice accomplishment all in one day considering the Dallas traffic. We're at Laurelland Cemetery. There's 3 interments here, one of them being Officer J.D. Tippett. Our first stop here at Laurelland Cemetery is the grave location of Buddy Walters. He was a deputy sheriff working for Sheriff Bill Decker. He was also a JFK investigator, but I want to, I guess, do a commercial, talk about the video I did about Buddy on my other channel called True Crimes with Diamond Dave. Go over and check it out. I tell the story about Buddy Walters going after a bad guy, and he's shot and killed in the hotel room. Well, I actually get into that exact room, hotel room, and I tell the story. Some say there's a conspiracy and Buddy was set up to be killed, but I don't think so. Our next stop is Mr. Roy Truly. He was the manager of the Texas School Book Depository. He's the one that hires Oswald for the job. Oswald would lie on the application. Mr. Truly interviews him, likes him, hires him. Now there's controversy about if Oswald can make the shots from the 6th floor, plus make his way down to the 2nd floor lunchroom. And here's the police officer Marion Baker and Roy Truly being interviewed in regards to this.
I heard those shots come off, and they seemed like they was high, and they were directly ahead of me. And as I tried to figure out where they came from, and the building that I had in mind was directly ahead of me, and that was the Texas Book Depository building. As I entered the building there, I asked some of the people that were standing around there where the stairs or elevator was. And there was a man who spoke up and said he was the building manager and he'd show me.
I realized that he didn't know the layout of the building, so I ran in with him. It was just a matter of seconds after the 3rd shot. And we ran across the shipping room floor, stopped at the elevators.
And we couldn't get that service elevator working. And he said, well, we use the stairs. And he turned around and immediately went up the stairs.
We ran on up the 1st flight to the 2nd floor. And the officer looked in the snack bar adjacent to our office.
And I kind of looked off to the right over there through a doorway and saw an image of a man walking away through that doorway. And when I got to the doorway, he was on down there a little bit, and I hollered at him and asked him to come back.
The officer with me had a gun in his hand, and he threw the gun toward the middle of Oswald, and he looked probably a little startled, like anybody else would if you just put a gun in his stomach all at once, which I thought was natural. But
I turned around and asked him if the man worked for him, and if he knew him. And he said, yes, says he works for me, and I know him. And at that time, the man never did say anything. I never did say anything further to him. I turned around and went on up the stairs to the 3rd floor.
And this man that you saw later turned out to be Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yes, sir, he did.
Officer Baker, as you think back now to November 22nd, would you hazard a guess as to the time you heard these shots and the time it took you to get into the building and go up the stairs and the time when you first saw Lee Harvey Oswald?
I believe, excuse me, from the time that I heard those shots and time I ran into that building, entered the lobby, and made it up to the second floor, it was approximately a minute and a half to 2 minutes. And that would be pretty close to it.
In your testimony before the Warren Commission, was this reenacted, this timing?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell me how you did it?
Well, we went back to the same day that we figured what I did that particular day, and we tried to get to the spot where I thought I first heard the shots. And from there, we took it and we did everything, reenacted the whole situation there, the entrance into the building, and the talk we had between the building manager and myself, and then we went on back through the building and we tried to get the service elevator down, and we then went on up the stairs, and that I believe somewhere around a minute and a half was our timing on it.
As you recall it, does that seem like a reasonable length of time for him to have been able to do those things?
He could have done it if he'd have been awful fast or if he'd pre-planned it right away. But the ceilings are low on each floor, and the stairways do not have too many steps on them.
These are the people that Captain Fritz is referring to earlier in this video. Marion Baker, the officer, Roy Truly, the building manager. Truly vouches for Oswald. They go right on by him looking for the shooter. The grave location of Officer J.D. Tippett. We're next to the road, so there's some traffic, but he dies November 22nd, 63, an hour and a half after President Kennedy is assassinated. The facts are eyewitnesses see Lee Harvey Oswald shoot J.D. Tippett. Those are facts. Quite a story. This happened at 10th and Patton, Oak Cliff part of Dallas. Right next to him is Marie Tippett. It looks like I'm going to go to the car and clean her up. She dies in 2021. She remarries another Dallas police officer. He dies, so she's a two-time widow. Let's go out to 10th and Patton and meet up with my two buddies. Now we're at the 10th and Patton. This is Oak Cliff part of Dallas. And what's the story on the X?
Well, so basically you have over here, somebody was putting an X down for years for the spot where Tippett fell. They put the X right here. You can barely see it now because I covered it with gray spray paint.
Okay.
And so about 2 years ago, I contacted Frank Battleson here, and I told him, I said, hey, it bugs me that this X is so far misplaced. It's not in the right spot. If there's going to be an X, let's at least have it in the right spot. So I contacted Frank, said, what do you think about the next time we go to Dallas, we put our own X out there in the right spot? And Frank says, sure, let's do it. So I told Dale Myers we were going to do that. I told him about our plan, and Dale agreed to come on board and help us with the measurements. So we make sure we put it in the exact correct spot within 6 inches. Now, when I say the spot, we're talking about the blood spot that was out in the street. That was from Tippett's head wound.
J.D. Tippett, Officer J.D. Tippett.
Yes.
You're involved in this too, Frank, the research?
Right.
What?
Then we started gathering our research to determine to try to determine a more accurate position.
Okay.
And we got Pete Barnes' scale drawing that he did that day.
Now he's a Dallas police officer.
Crime lab.
Yes.
Crime lab.
Sergeant Pete Barnes.
He did crime scene measurements after everybody else left.
And photographs.
Right.
He had a set of photos, and we got all his photos, and we got his actual handwritten field notes. His scale drawing, handwritten field notes that he did that day. And we brought tapes and my accident reconstruction materials out here to recreate.
We had a 100-foot cloth tape measure.
Exactly. And I could determine by how he wrote up his scale drawing is exactly how we did it in the 70s. So I could tell exactly what he did. So we brought all that material here, and we recreated his scale drawing as accurately as we could, and that left us with this position.
So Pete Barnes' scale drawing said that the location to Tippett's. Now Pete Barnes never spelled out that he was measuring to the blood spot, but it's all we have to go on because the body was gone. So we were thinking to ourselves, what would he have measured to? And our only conclusion was he was measuring the blood spot in the street. What else would he have had to go on? The body was gone. There wouldn't have been anything else.
So where was the officer's car at? Cruiser.
Almost exactly where this blue, what is this? This Dodge Charger, whatever it is.
Yeah, so
Tippett's patrol car would have been sitting almost exactly right here, but it would have been angled out away from the curb somewhat, more like this.
So the suspect and
well, let's go back to Pete Barnes for a second.
Okay.
So Pete Barnes said that his measurement was that it was 114 feet along 10th Street, east of the intersection of 10th Street with Patton. 114 feet and 13 feet out away from the curb. So we had our 100-foot cloth tape measure. You want to go down here, Frank, and address that measuring spot?
So this is 13 feet from the curb.
Yes, this is 13 feet out from the curb, and this is also 114 feet east of the intersection. So 114 feet, and we used a 100-foot cloth tape measure. And Frank, so come down here, and we'll show you how Frank did it. So what Frank did, Frank used his accident reconstruction experience. I guess reconstruction would be
correct, and I could tell by his field notes how he did it.
Yeah. So explain what you did here.
So the way they did it in that time period was we create a right triangle. We come along the axis of this curve, and we intersect that with the axis of this curve.
And you drew like a little angle right here.
That becomes the reference point from which all the measurements are based. And I could tell from Barnes' scale drawing that he started here and he measured along this axis, this axis, and performed his measurement.
So what we did was Frank started right here. Actually, I held the tape measure. Now we had a 100-foot cloth tape measure. I held it in place right here. I think I was stepping on it if I remember right. And Frank went 100 feet down, right up along the curb. And so the tape measure was only 100 feet long. We were looking for 114 feet. So Frank put a marking on the curb at the 100-foot mark. Then we went to that 100-foot mark and measured an additional 14 feet along the curb. So now we're at 114 feet. Now Pete Barnes says it was 114 feet east of the intersection and 13 feet out in the street. So then all that was left to do once we had our 114 feet along the curb was we measured 13 feet out into the street, and that's where we put our X. So that X is correct to the blood spot, according to Pete Barnes, at a minimum. The X that we put out here 2 years ago is going to be within 6 to 10 inches. I'm just allowing a little bit of room for error, which I don't think we erred. So the X that we put out here, in my opinion, is within 8 to 10 inches of being exactly where the blood spot was that you see in the street when you look at the J.D. Tippett crime scene photos. Because the body's gone, but you can see where the blood spot was in the street.
Okay. Why come out and do this?
The reason I got the idea because in years past, someone had always been placing an X out here to designate where Tippett fell. And I knew where Tippett fell, and I knew that X was not even close to where Tippett really fell. So I always felt like I said earlier, if there's going to be an X out here designating where Tippett fell, let's at least make the X be in the right spot. So when we made our trip down here, I got some white parking lot stripe paint, and I also brought some gray street colored spray paint. So the first thing we did was we covered the incorrect X with gray spray paint just to kind of drown it out. And you ask, why did we do it? The reason we did it because I wanted the X to be in the correct spot. Once we put our X in the correct spot, out of curiosity, Frank and I measured from our new X to the old X, and it was exactly to the inch 25 feet. 25 feet too close to the corner. 25 feet to me is pretty significant. Let's at least get in the right spot, and that's why we did it.
What is your name?
I'm Bill Brown, and this is my buddy Frank Battleson, B-A-D-A-L-S-O-N.
Excellent. Hey guys, thanks for coming out here and telling the story. We were at J.D. Tippett's resting place earlier, paying our respects. So I wanted to come out here and tell the story of the correct X. X marks the spot.
Beyond Dealey Plaza.
Yeah.